Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to do a practical walkthrough of the Engstrom Carestation Ventilator. We'll break down everything you really need to know to get it up and running safely and effectively.
So here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 6 key parts. We'll kick things off with the basics of the machine itself, then we'll walk through setup and patient use, and we'll wrap up with the more advanced features and, of course, the incredibly important safety alarms.
All right, let's start with the tour of the machine itself. Getting to know the layout and the main controls you'll actually be using day in and day out. So here she is, the Engstrom Carestation. It's a really versatile ventilator that you can use for pretty much everyone, from infants to adults. So let's just break down what we're seeing. Right up top, that's your main display, your command center, really. Right below that is the ventilator unit, which is the engine of the whole system. And then off to the side, you've got an optional module bay for any extra patient monitoring you might need. This slide gives us a really great overview of the main controls. Now, the real star of the show is the comm wheel, right there in the center. You're going to use it for almost everything. You turn it to scroll through options, and you push it to confirm your selections. It becomes second nature pretty fast. Then off to the sides, you've got your menu keys for those deeper functions, quick keys for settings you need to change on the fly, and this one right here is crucial, the silence alarms key. Okay, so we know the controls. Now let's walk through what are probably the most critical first steps. Getting the ventilator ready for a new patient.
Getting started follows a very specific sequence. So after you power it on, the very first thing you'll do is select the patient type, and then enter their ideal body weight. This part's really important because the machine uses that info to suggest your starting ventilation settings. After that, you'll move right into the pre-use check.
And this brings us to what I consider a completely non-negotiable step, the pre-use checkout. I know it says highly recommended, but really, it's a vital safety procedure. The system runs a full diagnostic, checking everything from its internal sensors to the entire breathing circuit. What's it looking for? Leaks and resistance, basically anything that could prevent it from delivering accurate ventilation.
All right, with the system checked out and ready to go, we can now dive into the core of what it does, setting up the ventilation modes.
The Engstrom has a whole suite of ventilation modes, everything from full control to just providing a little bit of support. You'll find them all right in the Vent Setup menu. So let's take a closer look at the fundamental difference between two of the most common types. This slide breaks down the two main philosophies for mandatory breaths perfectly. Think of it like this. On the left, with VCV, you are guaranteeing the volume of every single breath, and the machine will adjust the pressure needed to deliver it. On the right, with PCV, you set a fixed pressure limit for safety and comfort, and the volume the patient gets will actually vary. It's a really key distinction in your ventilation strategy.
Another absolutely essential setup step is configuring the backup mode. Think of this as your safety net. If you have a patient who's breathing on their own, but they suddenly stop or their breathing becomes too shallow, the ventilator will automatically switch over to a preset mechanical mode to make sure they're still supported. It's a critical feature.
Okay, once ventilation is up and running, your focus is naturally going to shift to monitoring the patient's response. And the system has some really powerful built-in tools for that.
You've got 3 really powerful ways to see what's happening. I like to think of snapshots as just taking a screenshot, perfect for capturing a specific event right as it happens. Trends are kind of like watching a time-lapse video. They let you see how things are changing over hours or even days. And then you have spirometry loops, which give you that really deep breath-by-breath analysis of lung mechanics in real time.
So beyond just basic ventilation and monitoring, the Carestation has several automated procedures that are designed to help you with specific patient care tasks.
The suction procedure is a fantastic example. It pretty much automates the entire process. It gives the patient extra oxygen before you disconnect them for suctioning and then again after you reconnect them. It just makes a very common procedure that much safer and more efficient.
The ventilator also has some really useful diagnostic tools built right in. So let's look at 2 of them. The NIF, or Negative Inspiratory Force, maneuver helps you figure out how strong a patient's respiratory muscles are. The intrinsic PEEP test, on the other hand, is used to see if the patient is fully exhaling or if they're trapping air in their lungs. Now, it is absolutely critical to remember that during the NIF test, the patient is not getting any breaths from the ventilator. And finally, let's talk about what is arguably the most important aspect of using any ventilator, managing alarms and, well, putting patient safety first. Setting proper individualized alarm limits is just not optional. The system guides you right through it. As you can see here, you just start by hitting the alarm setup key, pick the parameter you want to change, and then simply use that comm wheel to dial in your upper and lower limits. Push the wheel to confirm, and you're all set. It's a quick but vital process.
Now, for a quick and safe starting point, the auto limits function is a fantastic tool. With just a single click, it actually analyzes the patient's current ventilation and sets reasonable alarm boundaries around those values. This table gives you a pretty good idea of the logic it uses, like, for example, setting the upper minute ventilation alarm at 2.5 times the current value.
Okay, let's just wrap things up with a final review of these fundamental safety checks. It all comes down to this. Use the right equipment, don't block the fans, and please remember that when the system is in standby mode, the patient is not being ventilated. But if you remember only one thing, let it be this. Always make sure you have a backup method of ventilation, like a resuscitation bag, right there at the bedside.
So that's our tour of the Engstrom Carestation, from powering it on to ensuring patient safety. Now, while this gives you the knowledge, that true confidence really only comes from hands-on practice. The machine is a powerful tool, but patient safety is always the #1 priority. That question on the screen is a good one to keep in mind. What's your most important check before you connect a patient? Thanks for joining us.